Welcome to the Test Driver Serger. I'm in here at the Quilts and Lace shop, and I have in a display a number of our Sergers. And it looks a bit overwhelming to see all of these ones, and that's not even all that we have that shows in the camera. But just to see which one would I choose and what would I do with the Serger anyway. Well, searchers are really on three categories. There are the basic overlock ones. Typically, there are currently 4-thread overlocks. Some of the older ones were only 3-thread overlocks, but pretty much currently all of them are 4-thread overlock. And that's most of the searchers can do that one. And actually, even if it says 4-thread, you can usually search also 3-thread and even 2 threads on several models on those ones too. But then we have also cover stitch. That's a totally different type of a stitching. You often see that one in sleeves and hems of the t-shirts. So that one is a special cover stitch capability in some of the combination searchers, or then there is also a cover stitch only searcher. And so that is really the three categories. We have the overlock, the cover stitch, and the combination. Well, then on these ones, the machines we carry, they are from Babylock and Brother. Most of the ones we have from Babylock because they're the ones who brought the searchers for home market. They've been doing it over 50 years, and they have the most user-friendly, easiest to use searchers there are, at least that's my opinion. Well, just a little history. Babylock was the company who brought the searchers for the home market. And here are some pictures that I've gotten from the Babylock educators about the first prototypes since 1963. So they looked quite a bit different than the searchers we have currently. In 1967, they brought up a machine that was actually mass produced. Again, still very different what the current searchers are. But Babylock's been doing searchers for a long time, so they have the most advanced, most user-friendly searchers in the market. So we tend to be very biased in our shop about the searchers. We really like the Babylock searchers. Well, what is different in a searcher compared to a sewing machine? Well, one of the things that you notice that if you hit that pedal all the way down, your searcher will go a lot faster than most sewing machines. Yes, we do have some sewing machines in the household that we can go up to 1500 stitches a minute, but most sewing machines do not go that fast. They are almost about half a speed. So of course we still have the control in the searcher using the pedal. If you just push it a little bit, it will go slower, but they do go faster. The commercial ones, they go really fast. Actually, commercially, they don't really call them searchers. They call them overlockers or overlock machines. So that's just another name for the 4-thread searcher that we refer in the home market. Then there are also cover stitch searchers, which are then the really different type of stitching. Other difference compared to only sewing machine is that we can have at the same time multiple needles in the machine. Depending on the model and depending on the stitch we are using, we may have one needle in the machine or 2 needles, or then a couple of the Babylock models, we can even put up to 5 needles at the same time. Yes, in a sewing machine, I can put the double needle or triple needle, but that's still one shank that then separates into different needles. You can't use those needles in the searcher. Those double needles, triple needles are sewing machine only. But in the searchers, these are individual needles. So we have different places for these different needles. So that's again a bit different. And maybe one of the most obvious difference is that we have all the threads in the machine on the top of the machine. There are no bobbins, which is really yeehaw good news. We never run out of bobbin thread. We don't have one. So instead of bobbins, we have loopers. Again, depending on the model, some machines may have 2 loopers, some 3. If you have a machine that is cover stitch only, it has only 1 looper, so it's a cover looper. But any of the machines that are the overlockers, the overlock machines, those ones we have upper looper and a lower looper. So 2 of those ones. And I have a picture later showing what they look like. Then one more very different thing is that there is a knife. Actually, their knife has 2 blades. There's a stationary blade and a moving blade. And the knife cuts that fabric just before it's sewn. Well, lots of times I get a question, can I just unlock that knife so I don't have to cut it and then I can sew in the middle of it? I said, can't go too far in the fabric with the overlock machine, because those loopers, they go over the edge. That's kind of the overlocks. It kind of goes over the edge of the fabric. So if I turn my knife off, I'm gonna have those loopers going over that bigger piece of fabric edge. And if I really stuff a lot of fabric in it, it's gonna jam the machine. So no, most times I leave my knife on, even if I'm not cutting. I just use it as a guide. But there are a few techniques that I want to unlock the upper blade, the moving blade. But most times we want to have the knife moving. So it's just kind of just what's the knife? On one class I took, the educator said that when you search, you don't want to look the needle. It's kind of same as in the sewing machine. Most times you want to have some kind of other point that you look at. In search, the point I normally look is the knife, because that is kind of like you drive in a car. You don't want to watch the hood ornament. You want to watch the road. So needle is your hood ornament, and knife in the searcher is your road. So what's the knife? And then other really, again, very unique thing in the searchers is that we have stitch fingers to support the fabric edge while it's being sewn. And what those stitch fingers do is they are the places where the stitches are formed. So searchers don't even need fabric to do a stitch. They are perfectly happy to do stitching on a thread on its own. And we use that function to make tassels. On the sewing machine, yeah, I can sew maybe a little bit between two pieces of fabric without any fabric. The threads just get twisted on each other. But if I start without any fabric in a sewing machine, I can't go too far, because sewing machines really need fabric to create the stitch. Searchers, however, they don't even need the fabric. So those stitch fingers are where the stitches are formed. And when we put fabric on top of it, that stitch then gets transferred onto the fabric while the feed dogs feed the fabric forward. Another unique feature in a searcher is that we have feed dogs that are in two parts. Sewing machine feed dogs, there may be multiple pieces in it, but that is one unit. Searchers, the feed dogs, are two separate units, and we can control the ratio, how much the front feed dogs are taking the fabric in versus the back taking it out. And that is referred as a differential feed. Here's the Baby Lock Vibrant. That's the most low-end one on the current models. It is a very simple one, and it is not manufactured in the factory that most of the other Baby Lock machines are made. So that's why it even looks a little bit different. But this one is it's a lower end machine, so it is a little bit more affordable. However, things that what comes up with this one is that we will have tension dials and also all manual threading. This one, however, they have improved the threading quite a bit, so it's not anymore as complicated as the really old ones. My very first searcher was a Singer from Joanne Fabrics, and it was a really hard thing to thread. So let me show a little bit how to thread this one. So on the Baby Lock Vibrant, all the searchers, pretty much when you open the front door, you see the threading areas. The manual threading machines, one of the things you have to remember with these is that they need to be threaded on certain order. That means that we need to thread the loopers first and then the needles. If you thread the needles first and then the loopers afterwards, the first stitches, the needles will become unthreaded. So always you have to thread the needles last, the loopers first. So on this one, we have the upper looper and the lower looper. These are the tension dials for each of those threads. And then the needle, left and right needle tension dials there. And they all have really nicely color-coded how to thread them. So they're not really super hard to thread, especially if you don't have bad arthritis. But you just have to follow the guides and make sure you catch each one of those hooks in there. And then we can do the... after threading the loopers, we can thread the needles. One of the things that this one has made really nice is that the whole front opens. So it is quite easy to see all the pieces. So it's not like some of the older ones or some other brands that I have used in the past that you have to really go back and forth to try to get them threaded. This searcher also has a nice thread guide or the fabric guide, which makes it easy to keep the certain amount of fabric for cutting. So that was one of the most basic ones currently. It can do 2-thread, 3-thread, and 4-thread overlock. We have several YouTube videos where I go a little bit more detail on those different kinds of stitches. So I'm gonna go quickly in here on the basics on the different machines, and then I will show some of the techniques that we can do with these. The next one up on the line, I have in here the Baby Lock Celebrate. This one is the first one that is produced already in the factory in Japan, where the original Baby Lock household machines were developed, and they are still manufactured. These are very sturdy machines, and they have also threading on it that is much easier. It was called the air jet threading, which has been in production so long time that the patent has already expired, and it's been now copied by several other brands also. This benefit on this one is that we don't have to go through all the different hooks. All we have to do is to put a little thread piece in the thread tail in the threading port, put the machine onto the threading position, and then just to do a air puff on the little lever. So we do the upper and lower looper separately. And then before stitching, I had to remember to take the threading position out of the way, and then I can close the door and do stitching. Celebrate has an air jet threading, but it still has tension dials for all the needles and the loopers. But benefit was that I don't have to thread them in certain order. This Serger will do, again, all the same stitches as the previous ones do, but it just is a little bit sturdier machines. The needle penetration is straight instead of in an angle, which gives you a little bit more piercing power and no damage to the fabric. And now I have the Victory. This one is very much looks very much like the Celebrate on the looper threading board. It's exactly the same air jet threading. But then the major difference on this one compared for the Celebrate is that we do not no longer have any tension dial. This one has an automatic thread delivery system, which actually measures the amount of thread. So it doesn't matter what thickness of the thread it is, because it measures how much you need in distance rather than the thickness. When all the manual tension dial ones, if I change the heavy thread in any of the positions, I may have to adjust the tensions a little bit. Also, when I change to different stitches, I will need to adjust all the tension dials appropriately for that stitch, do some testing, and then do the actual project. Nice thing on this one is because we don't have any tension dials, we actually don't even have any tensions. So on this one, all I had to tell on the stitch selector what stitch I'm doing. Currently this has been threaded for the 4-thread overlock, so I have the setting at A. If I do a 3-thread narrow overlock, I will put this lever to B. If I do the narrow hem, I will do C. If I do a rolled hem, I do D. Of course, I need to still thread the machine appropriately for those different stitches. The machines are very easy to thread. Again, it's just that threading for the loopers is just a little pump in here, the same as the Celebrate was. And then the needle threads, all I had to do go over there. And it also has a built-in needle threader, as the Celebrate had one also. Then the next one online from the Baby Lock brand is the Acclaim. This is still a 4-thread overlock. It does exactly the same stitches as all the previous ones. However, we have a couple additional ones on this one. We have a dial for the wave. So this one has the Baby Lock exclusive wave stitch, which makes really pretty decorative edges. And on the machine classes that we have in the YouTube channels, I go through all the different versions of the wave stitches, and they are set instructions and settings for that one. So on this one, I don't go through that kind of details because those are really on the machine classes. But this one has the first one on the line that we have the wave stitch also. Other unique things on this one is that it has the extraordinary threading for the loopers, which is a little bit different than the air jet threading. So on this one, I click those threads in there. Take the other ones out. This one, all I had to do is to put the lever to threading position, rotate the hand wheel. When you hear the clonk sign, that's when the threading tubes go in place. And then I will take the thread tail, as long as I have a clean end on this one. The little note says in here, do not oil. It means that those two ports are not oil ports. They are threading ports. I always joke about in the classes that also should say, do not spit. We don't want to spit on this end. So no licking on the thread. Just click it so that it's a clear end. And then we will put it through the U for the upper looper. And then the L for the lower looper. Okay, I have now put the upper looper thread in the U and lower looper to the L, just about 1/2 inch to 1 inch on the thread. And then I will push the button and it threaded both loopers at the same time. When on the Victory and the Celebrate, we had to thread them one at a time and use the little pump. And on this, the same on all these threads, we can leave the tails as long as they are no longer than about 3 inches. If it's too short, it's not going to catch it. If it's too long, it may get tangled up. This one also has a needle threader that has air threading on it. So it's we just lower the pressure foot down so it has a little bit more space. Let's see, the purple one here is for the left needle. So on this one, all I had to do is pull the lever down. Again, as long as I have a clean cut, and I will point that thread tail to the eye of the needle. Push the button, and here it is threaded. So this one has also the air needle threader, which is the first one on the line that now we have that one. All the other needle threaders are more mechanical. But then on the settings wise, it has the automatic thread delivery. The same way we can tell the machine what thread we'd use. But we have also extra safeties on this machine. It won't run if the doors are open. And also you can't close the door if you don't have this machine on a certain position. This one also has the extra feature that if my pressure foot is up, it still won't run. Because on the other machines, if I have a pressure foot up and I will start stitching on it, they would run but make really ugly stitches. So that's another benefit in here, that it won't run until I have all the things ready to go. So that was Acclaim. Now we have a machine that has a little bit more places for the threads and needles. This one is the Acclaim. The previous model on this one was called Evolution, and the one before that Evolve, and then there was Evolve Wave also. These were the first Sergers that we were able to do 8 threads at one time, which means that we really combined 2 stitches together, the cover stitches and overlock stitches. So we really have 2 machines on this one. So on the overlock side, which this one is kindly threaded for the 4-thread overlock, same as the previous one, the Acclaim I had. But this one, I can also thread the cover stitch at the same time or separately. So that's why I say it has 2 machines in one, because we can do cover stitches, which are the stitches that you see often on t-shirts, so I actually use it a lot for decorative stitching. On the overlock side, the threading on this one is exactly the same as we have for the Acclaim, except for the needle threader. This one doesn't have a built-in needle threader. It just comes with the manual one, because we have spaces for 5 needles on this machine. We have the overlock needles in the back, which are currently put in, and then we have 3 spaces for the cover stitch needles in the front. And that's why we can have 5 needles and 3 loopers at the same time. So this side of the machine in here are those dials are for the cover stitch side, and this part is for the overlock. So again, it has the automatic thread delivery, and it also the extraordinary threading for the loopers. And here we have the best of all, the Triumph. And she's sitting even on her beautiful koala cabinet. You don't have to get the cabinet, of course, but it is a handy one to have this one. These cabinets are available for some of the other models too. But this one has been only made for this, so that there has a perfect space for it, and even place for the collect all the thread trimmings and the fabric trimmings. Well, this machine is larger in size, but it does all the same stitches as the Acclaim does. So it's like, well, why would I want this one instead of Acclaim? Well, this one having this extra space, being 5 inches, which is the largest in the industry for cover stitches, allows to do more easily decorative stitches. If you do just the hemming on t-shirts and things, you don't need all that extra space. But if you do any other the decorative stitching or quilting on it, that way the extra space becomes handy. Other differences between this one and the Acclaim is that this also has the needle threading that is the air threading, the same as we have in the Acclaim. So we have the addition on that one. Plus there is a speed control, which is really nice when you want to do some a little bit slower, because the Sergers tend to go really fast. They go up to 1500 stitches a minute, which is almost twice as most of the sewing machines. Yes, we have now sewing machines that go over 1000 stitches a minute, and some of the straight stitch machines do go up to 1500 also. But most sewing machines do not stitch as fast. But sometimes I don't want to go so fast, so that is nice to have the speed control. However, we can of course control the speed with the foot pedal, but if I accidentally step it all the way, it doesn't run off me too fast. So it's easy to do that more precise stitching with this one. Other one of my favorites with this Serger is it has a knee lever, which is handy sometimes when you hold the fabric with both hands, and then you need to lower the pressure foot, and it's like you need that third hand. Well, that is the third hand. So this is it's a really nice feature for it too. But otherwise, it does exactly the same stitches. We have the cover stitches and the chain stitches, of course, and then all the different overlock stitches, the same as the Acclaim. The previous model on this one was called Ovation, which was very similar, other than it didn't have those air needle threading. And here we have the Euphoria, which is the newest machines in the Baby Lock Serger line. This one is the cover stitch only machine. It replaced the original cover stitch machine, which was just called cover stitch. But this one has the air threading for the looper, and it also has really nice needle threader. It's a mechanical one, but it can thread all 3 needles. We can do a triple cover, a 2-thread cover, the narrow cover, or then we can also do a chain stitch. So this one doesn't have the knife, doesn't have the overlock capability. It's a cover stitch only, but it's a great machine because we have that 5 inches of space, the same as the Triumph has for the also for the cover stitch side. I have one more Serger here to show. This one is the model that we carry from Brother, and it is the page setter model. This one is a 4-thread overlock, very similar that the other 4-thread overlocks. I would put this machine between the Vibrant and Celebrate because it is a little bit sturdier, a little bit bigger, and some features a bit more convenient than the Vibrant. Also, on price-wise, it kind of goes between those 2 machines. So it is still a manual threading, manual tension, but it has some nice features like little trim pin here, and then the threading is fairly easy. Again, we can see pretty much all the places where to go, but it is a manual threading, manual tensions. Nice thing on this machine also is that it has this sewing table, which gives a bigger surface for your items that they don't fall off. Also, it has a free arm. So this is the sewing table, but it also is a place that you can keep lots of the supplies there too, accessories for the machine. So that is the Brother page set, the PS5234. When we do the test drive a Serger pillow class in the shop, I normally have machines set up on certain stitches, and then we will do a round robin type of a stitching on a pillow. On this pillow there are multiple techniques. And rolled hem is in this case used in a ruffle. So this is just a part of the one of my little samples that I have. So I have on this one, I put a woolly nylon type of or texturized nylon, poly yarn, different brands of it, the thread in the upper loop to give a little bit better looking finish on it. So on this one we will have 2 pieces of fabric that have been cut across the bolt, 3 inches wide, and we're gonna first join them together and then stitch around one edge. But before stitching it, I'm gonna show how would I thread the machine for this stitching. So on any 4-thread overlock, when we do a rolled hem, the decorative thread that will show the most goes to upper looper. In this case, I'm gonna use the poly yarn, that these are poly nylon type of thread, texturized thread. It's made out of polyester, so it can take a little bit more heat. But instead of putting just one, I'm gonna put 2 spools at the same time on this, because this is a little bit thinner than some of the woolly nylons. So I'm gonna put 2 of them. And since I'm running out of the space on the spool pins, I'm just gonna put them on a table. So I have threaded them together up to this point. And then on here, this thread cannot be used with the air threading directly, because there's nothing to air to catch. Also, if it is a heavier one, the air just can't take it. But for the lower looper, I'm going to use only Serger thread. So on this one, I have already put the thread onto the lower looper position and brought the machine for threading. And all I have to do is give a little puff and the thread comes out. And if you don't see it in the end, I know it's a black thread, hard to see. I may not have had enough. I'll pull a bit more. So now I definitely see it. And I can just clip this one about 3-4 inches and leave it there. For the upper looper, because of that heavier thread, I'm gonna do a thread cradle. So which means that I'm taking just the only Serger thread, a longer length of it, and take those 2 thread tails. Oh, where's the other end? 2 ends of it. And as long as again they are clean cuts, I used my snips for that one. I will put those 2 ends to the upper looper threading port. And then I will hold on this other end a bit, put the thread into the upper looper, push the button, and almost went there. I was holding too tight, so I can see it coming out of the upper looper there. Heavier one, so here we go. So in this case, I'm going to pull it so that I have still the loop. Put my 2 pieces of thread on that loop and then pull it through. There it comes. So that is how I can easily thread with the heavier threads too. Just using a little thread cradle. So I will leave those threads. I will need to take one of the needles out, and when you do a rolled hem, the needle that I need to leave in will be the right needle. So I will remove the left needle and then just to have this needle thread as it is. For the setting on the machine, I will put it to D. Other things on this machine I need to do is I will put it for the rolled hem side with the very short stitch length. Take the machine from the threading position. And then I'll usually with these stretchy threads, I like to put my differential feed to 0.8. It'll keep the fabric more taut, so those stretchy threads don't pull it and bugger it. So after I have threaded it, I lower the pressure foot down and I'm just going to do a quick test on a piece of scrap. Just to check, I'm going to lengthen the stitch length a little bit more for the heavier thread. I think that looks very good. So on this one, you see those heavier threads in the upper loopers covering the edge very nicely. So I think that is good. So for the first thing, to have a continuous longer piece for the ruffle, I'm going to join these 2 pieces together. So I'm just going to put the right sides together, so selvage is matching. And I will use this same stitch to join these the two pieces of the fabrics for one longer piece. So I'm just going to put it in front of the knife, and I have my knife to trim off just where that selvage starts. So instead of just using it for the edge finish, I also used it for the construction seam. It makes a nice little neat seam in that one. And on this one, I had lengthened the stitch length a little bit, but I think I'm going to leave that one for the rest of it too. I could have shortened it one more notch, but I think it looks good. The other end, I could do the same thing, but I wanted to do another technique on this one. So instead of just having these ones to be finished the same way, I'm going to have these ones to be cut on a little bit of a curve. Because it's a little bit different to sew a curve in a serger than in a sewing machine. And then in the end, we're going to just to overlap these edges. It makes it nice looking finish anyways. Okay, I just used the scissors to cut these two ends. They were right size together still. And I just cut the little curved edge out. So that will be scrap. And then I'm taking a single layer and right side on the top, because the rolled hem stitch looks prettier on the right side. So I'm gonna just trim off a midsection. We don't want to trim too much. We don't want to make the this one to be too small or too narrow, but just if I don't trim any, I may run into a problem that I go too far off the edge, too much to the left, and then my stitches are not catching the edge of the fabric. So I'm just going to put it in front of the knife and just to trim a little midsection off. And when I'm going a curve, I have to remember in a serger the knife is about 1/2 inch before the needles. So instead of me watching the needles, I watch the knife. And then I'm going to just to guide the fabric so that this the curve, the edge of the fabric is going to be still caught with the knife. So I just keep my fingers going to be side there and stitch it and trim off that just a little bit. If it looks like it's running off the edge a bit, I'm going to lift the toe a bit and catch it back in there to straighten out. And then I can just keep going. So that is where the edge look like then. So I'm going to finish this one, and when I get onto this segment where it joins, that is when I'm going to show how we get over that bump. Okay, now I'm approaching this seam. Well, because of the several of these feet, they have a little pump in there. So that extra seam, being quite bulky, can get caught easily. There are also on these smaller machines, we also have an optional foot called a flat foot that will help somewhat. Also, the Triumph has a little bit flatter foot already. So depending on a bit on a machine, but several of them has a little pump on the side in there, and it may kind of cause the fabric to be caught on that one. So I slow down a little bit on this part, so the knife will trim it off, and it feels like it's gonna be catching. Again, we don't wanna really pull or push the fabric, but I just gonna help it a little bit there. And here it went over there. And now I can feel it's gonna be caught up on that pump behind the foot. I'm gonna kneel down, I will lift it up a bit so that it will just get past that little pump, and off I go. So I will continue finishing this one. And again, I'm getting to approaching this other curve. So same way, I put my fingers on the left side and just ease it in. And if it looks like it's not catching, let me just lift the toe a bit. I'm really watching the knife, not the needle. At some point, you may have to lift the pressure foot a little bit from the back to release it from there too. And if you make this curve very, very tight, very small radius, it's harder to do this. So I purposely didn't make it very, very tight. It looks prettier that way too. And we have a thread cutter there too. So here it is. Here's my other side of it. And let's find the join piece. We'll have a little pump on the join always, because the fabric physically cannot roll over that seam, but I think that looks really nice. So that is part of our ruffle done. And even if if I wanted, I could give a little press on it, but it looks pretty good to me as it is. So didn't take long at all. So that was one of my favorite techniques in a serger, is to do the rolled hem. Great one finish in edges over napkins and ruffles. Well, the next part, I'm going to use the Brother Page setter machine. Again, any 4-thread overlock, this would work. So again, it really doesn't matter. I'm just going to different machines. The settings are pretty much the same. And this one, I'm going to gather the edge of the ruffle. So the first part, I did the rolled hem on the edge, and then I'm going to gather. This is another one of my favorite techniques in the serger, because it makes the gathering so much easier. So instead of a sewing machine sewing 2 rows of thread stitches or basting stitches, and then pulling the bobbin thread and hoping that they don't break, especially when we have over 2 yards of fabric in here, that we need to make sure that in a sewing machine you have a strong enough bobbin thread for that. Of course, you could use a ruffle or the gathering foot in a sewing machine too, but sergers make it so easy, because pretty much all the current sergers, I know at least all the ones we have here, we have a thing called differential feed. So the differential feed allows us to have the 2 sets of feed dogs, which is a unique thing in a serger. We, instead of having 1 set of feed dogs, we have 2 sets. And we can have the front set of feed dogs taking fabric more than the back's taking out. So it's making it punch up, which means it's going to gather it. So I'm using a 4-thread overlock. You could do it with a 3-thread, but it's not as good, not as sturdy. So 4-thread always works the best. I have really odd colors on this serger at the moment, all different color spools. It really doesn't matter what colors you have on this case, because these are all going to be covered anyway. They're going to be inside the pillow. So I'm leaving those odd colors on this machine. Looks like it's a brand new machine, and they're the threads that came with it. So for the setting it, or for the gathering, I have currently set this one for the balanced 4-thread overlock. Well, for the gathering, what I want to do is I want to put the differential feed. And on this machine is a little lever on the side. So it's a little lever on the side. On the normal setting, it would be 1.0. On the baby lock, they just have a letter N for like neutral. Or then we can go on to the numbers above the 1 or below the 1. Above the 1, it makes the front set of feed dogs going, taking more fabric, so it will take more fabric in, more gathers. So I'm going to put it to 2. In theory, we should get 2-to-1 ratio. Well, we don't exactly always get it, because the fabric fights a bit, even though the feed dogs will do their job. Other thing that makes it better gather, especially medium weight fabrics, is to lengthen the stitch length. So the normal we have around 2 to 3, but now I'm going to go all the way to 4 millimeters. If I have a very short stitch length, there's not any space the fabric to gather, so that's the reason why I wanted to have it a little bit more. And when I'm gathering, I'm going to gather this other raw edge of this fabric strip. I'm going to just put it in front of the pressure foot, and in front of the knife, so my knife will trim off a little bit again. I don't want to trim too much, because I don't want to lose too much of that ruffle, but just a little midsen off there. Other important thing is that I don't hold this tight, because if I'm holding it really tight, it's going to prevent the gathering. So I still want to guide it, but just gently. And if the previous step felt like it was not moving very much at the time, because we had a very short stitch length, this one we have very long one, so it feels like it's going really fast. So I'm just going to a little bit push the pedal, and I can see the gathers already forming pretty nicely. Other thing that will help a bit is to put my fingers behind the foot, so it kind of stops them coming out too fast and gather more. Also, the manual tension machines, I can get more gathers if I tighten the needle tensions. So I would go in this machine from your normal around 4, depending on a bit what thread I'm using, but around 3 to 4. If I go to maybe 4 to 5, that will give me a little bit more gathers. But I think I'm pretty good at the moment. I think that looks good. These gathers are adjustable. If you don't get enough at one time, you can also then pull them more by pulling the needle threads a bit. And having all these different color needle threads make it a bit easier to find them too. I think I'm pretty good on this. And that looks pretty nice gathers to me. So I'll finish this strip of fabric. And I'm going to sew a bit of a longer tail on this one, so that just in case if I didn't have enough gathers or too much gathers, then I can ease that in. So I'm going to leave a bit of a tail, and we have a thread cutter there too. So here we have it, really quick way to gather. I have now finished the edge on this one, have sewn the two gathering threads, because if I need to adjust more, all I have to do is take those two needle threads, which if I straighten this tail, those two needle threads are the two shorter ones. And on this one, they're kind of easy to find because they are even different colors. So if I pull those two needle threads, I can gather this even more. But I'm not going to gather more because I think I may just have perfect amount. So very easy to do gathering in a Serger. The main thing was 4 thread overlock, and then put your differential feed to 2 and the stitch length to 4. The next part on this project, I'm going to have to do the pillow top, which really is a technique called quilt as you go, because it makes a pieced and quilted piece of fabric at the same time. It's a great technique for making blankets or table runners, placemats, things like that one, because everything is pieced and quilted at the same time. So this was just a little sample piece that I had. So I'm gonna go ahead and use the Acclaim machine. So on this one, again, I'm still using a 4 thread overlock and pretty much the normal settings. Just a balanced overlock with the stitch length at 3, because I'm using a bit heavier fabrics, heavier layers. And then for the stitch width, I'm gonna put it at letter M, because on the Paper Lock Sergers, that letter M is where the 6 millimeters is from the left needle to the knife, and 6 millimeters is current 1/4 inch. So I will get pretty much perfect 1/4 inch seams this way. Love using this setting for when I do piecing. If I do just regular piecing, I would not use 4 thread overlock on that one, because really don't need the 4 threads on that one. But this one, because I'm doing also the quilting, that 4 thread will flatten the seam on those bulkier sections a little bit more. So I will use 4 thread overlock. So I will just need to retread this one needle, and then I'm ready to go. So settings are the normal ones in here for needles, upper looper, lower looper, the stitch selector at A, and then the stitch width at M, which is the mirror setting for that one, and then the stitch length at 3 on the standard side. For this pillow top, because of having the stripe, there's five pieces of fabrics. So I have on this case 3 of the darker ones and 2 of the lighter color ones. So I need to lay these ones out so that I'll have them looking nicely, because I have not an even number on this case. These ones are 3 inches wide, so that just makes that little small pillow, but of course you can always alter the sizes as needed. Then I have 5 pieces of muslin, because we don't really see the other side of the pillow, so we don't need to put pretty fabric there. But if you do a placemat or table runner, you could put some pretty fabrics, because then that will be then the other side of it. But this case, we're just going to use muslin. And then 5 strips of thin batting. And I prefer cotton batting because it clings to the fabric better than the polyester one. And also very thin one, because we have a lot of layers. Otherwise, those seams get very bulky. So this one is the Quilter Select Request. So this is just the perfect weight for it. So we're going to start by taking a quilt sandwich. The pieces that I have 3, so the darker ones in this case. I will take the top piece, 1 of the batting pieces, and 1 piece of a muslin. Just a basic quilt sandwich, but we're not going to stitch yet, because we're going to add more pieces for this one. Sorry, wrong side. There we go. So we have those pieces. So normal quilt sandwich, the muslin, which is the backing, and then we have the batting and the top piece. Then I'm going to take another piece of a muslin and I put behind. If this was pretty fabric, you want to make sure you put right sides together, but muslin doesn't really matter. And then on this side, I will take the opposite color of these fabrics, because that's going to go next. I'm going to take that one, put it right sides together. And then I'm going to take one more piece, one more padding, and goes all the way to the top. So I have a total of 6 pieces here. So we have the 2 pieces of the back-in fabric, which is muslin in this case, right sides together, 1 piece of a padding, and then 2 top pieces right sides together and 1 piece of padding. And a good pin, or I really actually like to use the clover clips because of these heavier layers. I made just finger pin them with my case. And just keep those edges together. And we're going to stitch this one, just trimming off a really, really tiny piece. Again, we don't want to trim off too much so that our pillow top doesn't get too small. So this one, I could sew it from this side, or I could sew it on this side. Really, I don't know if it matters. I used to always do it from the padding side, but I learned one point I thought it works a little bit better if I put it on this way. So I put that one in. And this time, instead of me putting it in front of the knife, I'm going all the way to the needles, because that way my foot doesn't push that top layer as much. I cannot catch them all at the same time, and I'm not really trimming much off. So I'm just going to put right where the needles are. And on this machine, the needles go straight down, so it's easy to kind of estimate where those needles will hit. If you have a machine that you can change the pressure foot pressure, this machine is on the side, the little lever on the side here. And if I put it on the smaller setting, it has a little bit less pressure. So that prevents it not pushing the top layer so much, because we don't have a walking foot for Sergers available yet, at least as far as I know. Several of the other machines, that lever or the setting is on the top. Like on this machine, the Victory, I would have to take a little coin or something to lever in there that I can rotate it. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. There's not really any numbers on this one, but you can just to count how many rotations you do, and then you can get it back to normal. That is the same way on Acclaim, and it also is the same way on the Celebrate. The Vibrant, we also have a pressure foot pressure. It's in the back here, so we have numbers from 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 being highest, normally I would use it at 3. The Brother machine, the Brother pace setter, we also have a pressure foot pressure here. And just rotating this one, lefty loosey, righty tighty, I can adjust the pressure. The bigger number, more pressure there is. So for the heavier layers, I would loosen it a little bit. So when I'm stitching this one, other way that I want to make sure that things won't move here too much is to keep my fingers or my hand in here on the left side of the machine. Just going to keep in those layers together. And I'm just going to adjust that they all are about the same position. Here we go. I'm just keeping my fingers there, just trimming off the little bit in case they are not exactly the same size. I have black threads in there, but that's all right. They're all inside, and my fabrics are kind of dark anyway. So this time when I open the top side out, that looks really good. Underside, I will take this layer of muslin, put it over, and all the seams are covered inside. So this time, that was really the fabric that goes to my left. And this will help if you press all these ones between each stitching so that the layers won't shift. And for the next piece, we will repeat it. Just pretend that this was the original quilt sandwich, because we have the muslin, padding, and the top layer. So we will take the third piece of fabric, which is the same as the first one, put this one right sides together on top. We have. And then I will take a piece of muslin. It goes behind. So that's important to remember to put this lining piece behind there so that they are, again, if this was pretty fabric, right size together. And then we'll take one more piece of batting that goes on the top. And then we'll just pin those layers, so then use the clover clips to hold them together. Just remember, if you pin, to take those pins before they reach the knife, because if you hit the knife with where the pin is, that knife is damaged, that will have to be replaced. So we never ever want to sew over pins, even in a sewing machine, but sergers definitely not, because that knife will just get damaged with the piece of metal. So that's one reason I like using the clover clips. But pressing on this one really helps, because it'll keep those layers. So okay, here I went and pressed the seams, and then I have my quilt sandwich again. I'm gonna just put it against right in front of the needles and guide it against the knife. And after I got it all started, just to make sure all the layers are together. And the same way, I'm gonna open the top, starting to look like a patchwork, and on the side here. So all the seams are again correct. Very often when I do this in a class, after the first seam, people tend to get a bit confused, and often what they end up doing is to put in the quilt sandwich all the way on the top. See, if I do this way, I put this on the top, and then the muslin. If I now sew this seam this way, yeah, this side looks good, but I would have the seam on the back side. That's why it's important to make sure that this lining piece, the muslin in this case, goes behind. So that's just important, that we have your most quilt sandwich, and it is sandwiched between these two other pieces. So I will do the same thing with this seam and one more seam, and that will finish the pillow top. And here is the completed pillow top. So the top side is all pieced and quilted. Both sides look pretty. So again, if this was a table mat or table runner or quilt, I would put pretty fabric on this side too, but pillow, we don't really see it. And I just want to show that was the original sample that we've been using many years. Here's the ruffle. Just going to see how the ruffle goes around, and then the top. For the back side, the one more technique we have on this one is to insert the zipper. And the zippers are easier in a serger than they are in a sewing machine. We have a couple ways to do that. We could do this one with the overlock, the way I've done on this one, which is the 4-thread overlock. And we need to use a cording foot. We don't have a zipper foot for the sergers, but we have a cording foot. And the important part is that the zipper is a nylon zipper, not a metal one. We can't use a metal zipper with the serger. So this one is a bit heavier one. The zippers that I like to use are the zipper by the yard, or the Make a Zipper brand by Sullivan's. They are not lovely because they don't have any metal stops, so I don't need to worry about those metal pieces with the knife, and I can cut the length I need. I need to have the length to be 2 to 3 inches. I normally have at least 3 inches longer than needed. So if my piece of fabric is 14 inches, I better have at least 17 inches, or maybe even half a yard length of the zipper, because we can't go all the way on that zipper pull. And here's just a little scrap sample that I have showing how I put the zipper on. So you can see that the zipper coil is just towards the main fabric, and then we have just used the 4-thread overlock to stitch it on, and then when we press it over, it just looks really pretty. It will be an exposed zipper. If you rather have it enclosed, we could, there's a technique that I could make a little extra flap piece on this one too, or then we could use the cover stitch. So the cover stitch, I would use a 2-thread narrow cover stitch, and then using the same cording foot, and then I can line up my fabric edge so that will be covered on the zipper coil, and stitch it the same way. So to sew the zipper with the serger, we will need to use the cording foot. And depending on the machine, if it is an 8-thread machine, we have only one available, which is the 5mm one. It means that the cord underneath the foot is a 5mm diameter for the width. These are snap-on feet, so very easy to put in. They all have the same places it snaps in. If you have a 4-thread serger from the baby lock ones, these feet come also with a 3mm and a 5mm. 3mm would work fine with this smaller coil also, so either one would work on that case. The settings are 4-thread overlock, and then only change I will do is that I'm gonna put the width as wide as possible, which is 7.5. The knife is gonna still trim off a little bit of that coil, or the zipper tape I should say, but that's okay because it's going to be all overcasted. The important part is that we will put the right sides together. So I'm going to put the zipper coil against the right side of the fabric, and then the coil goes to the groove of the foot. And this time I'm going to use the Acclaim. Again, any 4-thread overlock, this technique would work. And all I have to do is just to keep those layers together and have this the coil inside the groove. If you have a little bit heavier coil on your zipper, the foot tends to push it a bit, or lighter weight fabric. I tend to kind of pinch these layers together so that my fabric doesn't feed too much, because the feed dogs will pull the fabric and lighter weight fabric can easily gather. You could also use those pasting tapes, like a wonder tape on that one, to keep those layers together. But I said I just kind of pinched them between my fingers. And here it is, perfectly nicely sewn. And if I fold it over, that is when it's going to be just pressed, and I could top stitch it if I wanted to. If I want to have it to cover, I could of course fold it over and top stitch in a sewing machine, or I could use the cover stitch or chain stitch. To put the zipper with the cover stitch side, so I have taken one of the needles out. So I have the narrow cover using the needles 1 and 2, C1 and C2. And then I have put the 8-thread serger cording foot in a machine. It has a hole that I can only do a chain stitch or cover stitch. But this time I have folded the fabric, pressed on about 1/2 inch edge on this one, and then I will just lay that one on the top side, the right side of the zipper. That way so I can line it up where that I don't actually see the zipper coil. And then all I have to do is just to stitch it in here, keep that zipper coil in the groove. And here is the zipper being put using the narrow cover stitch. This is the way I'm going to do that sample pillow, so I'm going to continue with this one. So the 2 pieces of fabric that I have, and on these ones I'm just going to go and press about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch on this fabric edge wrong side. If I do use with the 4-thread overlock, I don't need to do the pressing. I will just put the zipper on top of it, but just want to do another different way. Here I have cut an 18-inch length of the maker zipper, and it just has multiple pulls. I just move the pulls out of the way so that I only have one within this length. And I know it's much extra length that needed, but I need at least about 3 inches extra when I use this one, because these ones don't have any stops, and I need to also open the zipper. So if I don't have any stops, one of the things you may want to put a little pin to hold it in the edge that we don't catch it, or then at least make sure that we don't pull that one out of the way. So that is the reason why I wanted to have a little bit of an extra both ends. So I'm gonna get the needles up there, and gonna put this zipper coil first into the groove. Anchor that in place, and then I can lift the pressure foot up and put this fabric in front of it, I can cover the coil a little bit. Again, the zipper coil is the right side up, so that you can see the pull is on the top. And then when I get to the end, I will just stitch off the zipper that way. And here's one side. Again, I have kind of covered that zipper coil with the edge of the fabric. And then for the other side, just now press the edge. And then I will have to do it from the opposite direction. So this is one reason you have to have that extra length. And I want to line them up so that I will start at the same point. Close this zipper a little bit so I can make sure that they are lined up, and I could use some pins in there to hold it in place too. And in order for me to get this fabric underneath, because the threads are still caught up in there. So I have a couple ways to do. I have lifted the pressure foot up, needles up, and I will take those thread tails a bit so that I can pull them in front of me and get them out from underneath. Pull a little bit longer tail on all the needle threads too. That way I can get my fabric underneath. Gonna do a rough line up. I know I didn't pin this one in place, because I can always adjust the areas a little bit if needed, if I don't have them exactly lined up, but I think that's pretty close. And here's the other side of it. And if you close it up, looks like I had my one side a little bit further in. If I don't like it, that is no problem with this stitch, because this one, with the end I finish, I don't really like this side, how it lined up a little bit too far. I like this other side better. I didn't guide it so much over. So this is the nice thing about this one, is that all I have to do is the end that I finished sewing. I clip the needle threads. I'll just cut those needle threads, and that looper thread will just start coming loose in there. So this stitch is very easy to take apart. The cover and chain stitches, we can just pull the looper thread, and then the needle threads fall apart. And now I can re-sew it because I wasn't perfectly happy with it. Okay. The other way to take this thread tails rather than pulling the needle threads up is to lift the pressure foot up, rotate the hand wheel until the needles are all the way up, rotating towards me. Then the only time ever you can go backwards in a serger is on this point, when I have my needles all the way up, and I rotate half a turn backwards so that needles are down, and when I pull it, it releases the looper thread, and I can then have them pulled open. And then if I slide my knife underneath, it will pull that needle threads around from the loop. So this time, let's see that I needed to just to have them a little bit there. gonna line it up there. Do maybe a couple stitches. Let's see if I can line it up better this time. So I'm just gonna keep it just pretty much level with this zipper coil. Then I'm at the end, just to move it around a bit there so I can go off the edge. I think I like it much better now. This doesn't have so much overlap there. I didn't have those edges lined up exactly. That is no problem with the zipper by the yard or this make a zipper ones, because I could pull this one out totally and readjust it. Actually, I often do that one anyway, so that it's easier for me to sew it. I'll sew that on the next step when we put it all together. But now I have all the pieces. I have the back piece, the quilted top, and then the ruffle. So the last part in here is to put them all together. And for this one, I will square up the back side and the quilted front to be the same size. And then I will use the sewing machine a little bit to paste it first, the ruffle onto the top layer, and then we'll do the final construction with the serger. The next step on the project is to square these ones, the top and the back in. I use my square ruler and I was able to get a 12 by 12 square out of it. So these strips actually were 12 inches long by 3 inches, so a little bit was lost in the seam allowances. That gave me 12-inch square, and the same thing on this one. These were 12 inches long, and I centered the zipper. And what I did with this zipper also was, after I had put it in, I pulled the pull all the way out, and then I insert it back so that it's halfway. That way it keeps my both ends together. That's really optional thing, but I like to do that with this zipper by the yard once, because then I can have this both ends closed. So I'm gonna put the backing aside a little bit and take the pillow top. So I'm gonna put the ruffle first onto the pillow top, and I'm gonna use the sewing machine to paste this one first. And then for the final constructions, we will use the serger. So for this one, I can have this little joint piece where the two curved edges could be either on one of the sides that is where the stripes end, or on the side in here on the side. I think I will put it on one of these ends. So on this one, I will just take the seam, somewhere we have the seam in here. There we go. I'm gonna line this one on the top edge there in the middle. And let's see if I place this one around. This might be pretty much the right length by accident. Oh my gosh, it is just perfect. If it wasn't, what I could do is I would, if I need more gathers, I could pull the needle threads a little bit more. Or then also other things I often do is I put a little bit more gathers in the corners. But then if it's too much gathered, then I could just release a little bit those gathers. And that's one reason I left quite a bit tails in here on the serger threads, that in case I needed to release some of these gathers. So I'm gonna pin this one around, and then I'll meet you at the sewing machine. So at the sewing machine, all I'm doing on this one is just to attach the ruffle to the edge on this fabric, this pillow top. I could have put the backing on top of it, pinned it and serged all layers at the same time. But there is just a big chance that this ruffle may move in and out and may not be caught exactly evenly. So that's why I normally like to use a little bit of a sewing machine for the pasting. When I mean pasting, I'm just gonna do normal stitch length, straight stitch, and gonna stitch over. And this time what I want to do is just to stitch kind of a little bit towards the left from that previous stitching line, the one that I used to serge. That way those ugly color serger threads won't be showing. So that's all I want to do with my pasting. So again, always take the pins out, whether in a sewing machine or serger. I like to do a little bit of a stylus, things to keep those layers together. And I can adjust the gathers. And now for the final seam, we're gonna attach the backing. And for this one, in order to make sure that these corners don't get messed up, because they could easily get caught up in the seam. And with the serger, it's not just that the stitches would catch this extra piece of ruffle in a corner, but the knife could even trim it out. So I want to do a little trick on this one first. I will just gather all of these corner ones and try to center them or point them towards the center. And then I'll take some long pins and pin it in this side, because that way I can get them out before I will turn the pillow right side out. And also then I know that I'm not gonna catch them in the seam. So all I want to do is just to gather those edges that they won't get caught in the seam. Just too many times I had to undo the ruffles on, because some piece of that ruffle, even though it looked perfectly fine on a table, but by the time I handled it, some of these pieces fell in, and then I had to undo it. And the problem with the serger is that we may even have a hole in the ruffle, and we don't want to have a hole in the ruffle. So here we go. So now one more decision: do I want to have the zipper to go parallel or opposite for this top piece? Because you don't really see them at the same time, but I'm gonna put them the same way. So I'm gonna put them this way. If you did not do this trick to move the zipper pull on this one in the middle, and this other end is open, just make sure that your zipper pull is somewhere in the middle, because this one I can still open up, because that is going to be where we turn the pillow right side out. And this time I'm gonna simply flip it over, because this is where easily those gathers could move. And let's put some more pins. The clover clips are great for this one too, because these are just the heavy layers. But I just use these long pins this time. If I use the serger, I often use the flower head pins, which my pin cushion I think is beside the serger at the moment. That's where I normally keep mine. But these long pins will too, and I always want to make sure that the pins are pointing out the way, and they are on the side of the fabric that I'll be stitching. That way I don't accidentally sew over, because like I mentioned earlier, in a serger we never ever want to sew over pins, because that will damage the knife blade permanently. So here we go. So I just put one pin in each corner and then one in the center. So the last construction piece on this one is going to be just to use the 4-thread overlock and serge all the sides. I left the corners square on this one. The blue pillow that I showed earlier had slightly rounded, so I could have done that one too. This one I want to do just a square corner, so I can show in the search also how we're gonna turn a corner. For this final step, I'm gonna use the triumph. Again, any searcher that does a 4-thread overlock will work on this one. However, this is the time I really do like and appreciate the baby lock searchers, the ones that are the Japan made, the heavier duty ones, because we have really a lot of layers on this one. So I really like to have these ones that the needles go straight down, because then there is not as much chance for them flexing and causing broken needles or skip stitches. So on this one I have set it on the normal 4-thread overlock, ordinary searcher thread on the both needles and the loopers. And I have also put in this machine 8012 Microtex needles, because they are very sharp needles and there are a lot of layers, and we are even going over the zipper. So that's why I want to have a sharp needles on this one. Because the needles that come with the machine, they are universal tip needles, which most times works as fine, but this time I wanted to have the sharper ones. Just to note that on the cover stitch side, we can't use these needles. We need to use the cover stitch needles, which are the ELX705 type. So this time I'm gonna leave my knife cutting, even though I'm not really cutting much off. And I'm gonna stitch on the side that is the pillow top, because now I have a stitching line. This was my pasting line. So I want to make sure that my stitches will be going either right on it or just a little bit towards the left of it. So that way I know that I won't be seeing any of my pasting stitches and also those gathering stitches, because I didn't have matching threads. So let's see. I'm gonna just start stitching here. And the stitch length I have put at 2.5. And the knife position I have at the moment the widest, which is the 7.5. And yes, there are a lot of layers, so I'm going kind of a slower speed on this one. My Triumph has also a speed control, so I have it at the smallest setting, and that way I can better control the machine too. But here we went over just heavy seam and no problem on that one. Again, just remember to take the pins out. This is the side that I'm now going over the zipper. So this is where I normally still use the hand wheel, because sometimes when those needles hit the zipper coil, even when we are using a nylon zipper, that could cause a bit of a trouble in there, depending how it hits it. So I often use the hand wheel just to go over that part, because I can feel like here was really tight spot, but that way I don't break those needles as easy. Or here I can just feel it. I'm going right through the zipper at the moment. I think I'm past it now. And on the corners, what I could do, I could go all the way off the edge and then come back. But if you want to pivot at the corner, I would just stitch right at the edge, rotate the hand wheel towards me to lift the needles up, and then I'm going to use my knee lever to lift the pressure foot. And if I slack the needle threads a little bit, tuck the fabric, I can now rotate it and pivot and line it up just again right next to the knife in here, and then we tuck those threads back. More detail on some of these techniques are on the YouTube channel that we have on all the Serger technique classes. So I'm just really quickly showing that one. And here we go. So I will go through all the way around this pillow. I will just search all the way off. Do a little bit of a tail, snip that one, And then I can weave this one with the bodkin or darning needle inside the seam. But let's see, I think we have it all caught up everywhere around there. That looks pretty good. So now I'm gonna go and see if we can turn it right side out. Okay, here it is. I have just woven this with the darning needle inside the stitches, and I can clip the excess out of the way. So now to turn this right side out, I've taken all the pins. Oh, I haven't. Let me make sure I take all those pins out too now on the corners, because I left this one in the middle. If I had not done this one, then I could just do this portion would be open. But because this one, I can just open it up, and then we can turn this one right side out. Looks like that looks pretty good. This is always the moment of truth. Did I get the corners? Oh, I think it's not too bad so far. Here we go, and one more corner. Then I would just put the pillow form. So even though this one is now, the inside is a bit less than the 12 inches, I will still use the 12-inch pillow form because that makes it nice and plump. Or you can just use a batting or fiber fill for that one. I will just give a little press for it. And here is how the pillow looks from the front side. I think it came out pretty good. Even I say myself, I think I got the corners fairly good. And here is that piece that we joined those two together. Just makes a little different attraction there. Thank you so much, and hope you enjoyed the Serger thing, because Sergers are just so wonderful things. We can do this kind of pillow very fast. This class that I've done many times during the last, oh my gosh, must be like 12 years. This one, every time we have had this class, everyone goes home with a finished pillow. And but I think the 3-hour event that we have normally, I even use about at least half an hour to 45 minutes just to go through the basics on the different Sergers, and then I will show some samples too, and then we all get one finish. So it is really quick project. So thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye for now.